Hey there, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments.
The thing about betrayal is, it never comes from someone you expect to hurt you. A stranger cutting you off in traffic? That's just part of the day. A coworker throwing you under the bus? Annoying, sure, but not devastating. But when it's your own sister, someone who once made you a peanut butter sandwich after you scraped your knee in third grade, someone who cried with you when your dog died, someone who stood beside you at your mother's funeral, that's not just betrayal. That's a slow, twisting kind of ache that sits behind your ribs like a second heartbeat. And when it finally hits you that you were never actually invited, not truly included, just tolerated until your presence became inconvenient, the pain doesn't come all at once. It seeps in quietly, like water under a locked door. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a chipped coffee mug and a half-eaten bagel when the phone call came in. My sister Becca's name lit up the screen, and I remember sighing before I even answered. I knew that tone she used before she spoke a word. Too cheerful, too bright, like she was trying to sell me something or hide something equally uncomfortable. And then it came, casual as hell. So listen, we're all heading out to Tahoe next week. Me, Tom, the kids, Mom and Dad. It'll just be a short family thing, just a little break. And don't take this the wrong way, okay? It's just that lately, you've been kind of negative. I didn't say anything. Not a gasp, not a laugh, not even a sarcastic, "Oh, really?" I just let the silence stretch out between us like a crack forming in glass. She filled it with nervous laughter. You know how you've been, right? I mean, with everything going on. We just thought you could use some time to yourself. No drama, no hard feelings. And just like that, she hung up. No invite, no apology, no space to argue or explain or ask if she was serious. My family, the same people I had housed, fed, and tolerated for months, had all decided I wasn't fun enough to be around, so they packed their bags and left me out of my own life like I was a sour note in their otherwise perfect little harmony. I sat in that silence for a long time. The bagel on my plate went stale. The coffee turned cold. The worst part wasn't that I'd been excluded. It was the way she made it sound like a favor. Like keeping me out of a family vacation was somehow an act of kindness, something done for my own good. As if they weren't trying to hurt me, just to preserve the good vibes. And maybe that's what finally did it. Not the slight itself, but the absolute certainty that they believed they were right. That they had every reason to erase me from the photo without guilt. I wasn't loud. I didn't yell. I didn't confront anyone, but something in me hardened. Right there in that kitchen, I looked around at the house I'd been keeping afloat for the last 6 months. My house, my mortgage, my food, my rules. Becca and her husband Tom had moved in just for a few weeks after a pipe burst in their place during a winter freeze. That was back in December. Now it was June. They never paid rent, never offered. I didn't ask. I let the kids take over the guest rooms. Let them blast the TV after 10. Let Tom use my tools and rearrange my garage. I made excuses for them when they forgot to clean up or when they left dishes for me to find in the sink. I was the good sister, the quiet one, the dependable one. I swallowed my irritation and smiled through it. Because that's what family does, right? But not anymore. I didn't scream. I didn't send a furious text or demand an apology. Instead, I stood up, walked over to the fridge, took down the little dry erase calendar where Becca had written Tahoe trip in fat blue letters, and slowly wiped it off. Then I went to my laptop, opened a browser, and started searching for locksmiths with 24-hour service. Because if I was too negative to vacation with, then they were too entitled to live in my house. You ever been cut out by your own family like that? Just because you didn't fit the mood they wanted? What would you have done in my place? I scheduled the lock change for the morning after they were set to leave. I didn't want a confrontation. I didn't want to fight on the front lawn with their kids watching from the car. I wanted silence, closure, a clean break like slicing through dead weight with a sharp knife. The guy arrived early, which was fine by me. While he worked, I walked through the house with a notepad, writing down everything that didn't belong. Becca's oversized blender, Tom's fishing rods in my hall closet, their kids' shoes in the entryway. I packed it all up, every pillow, every towel, every charger. I labeled each box. I rented a storage unit under my name and had it all dropped off the same afternoon. I even made sure to keep the receipt. When it was all done, I sat in the middle of my living room, which suddenly looked much bigger without their chaos. I poured myself a glass of wine, red, heavy, something bold, and waited for the guilt to come. It didn't. All that arrived was a kind of quiet I hadn't felt in months. Let them have their lake view and fake smiles. Let them toast marshmallows and post filtered photos of a happy family. I'd be here, in my own home, reclaiming every inch of space they took for granted. And when they came back, well, let's just say, the welcome mat would be gone. There's a peculiar clarity that comes when you decide, not in anger or impulse, but in absolute stillness, that you're done being stepped on. It's not a scream or a slammed door. It's the quiet click of a mental lock sliding into place, the moment you stop giving your grace to people who treat it like a doormat. That morning, as the locksmith's van pulled up the drive and the sun bounced off the hood of a car that wasn't even mine, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. A sense of ownership, not just over the house, but over my damn life. He was a big guy, gruff in that polite blue-collar kind of way, clipboard in one hand, tools in the other. He didn't ask questions, just nodded when I pointed at the front door and said I needed the locks changed. While he worked, I took a walk around the perimeter of the house, past the flower beds I had planted alone, down the path where Becca's kids left scooters and plastic baseball bats like breadcrumbs. I picked up each one, not harshly, not angrily, but with the quiet determination of someone reclaiming what had been swallowed by other people's noise. In the garage, I found Tom's fishing gear leaned against the back wall. He always meant to organize it, he said. Just needed a free weekend. That was 5 months ago. I found Becca's extra yoga mats, the ones she used exactly once and then stacked on top of my garden bins. Even the freezer was half full of food I didn't buy. Frozen pizzas, their favorite ice cream, chicken nuggets in bulk bags. I left none of it behind. If it didn't have my name on it, it went into a box. No labels, no frills, just corrugated cardboard and packing tape. Sterile and efficient, the way boundaries should have been drawn from the beginning. I could have tossed it all. I could have had a bonfire in the backyard and called it closure. But that would have been messy, emotional, and what I wanted was precision, clarity, control. So I rented a 10 by 10 storage unit across town, paid 3 months up front, and had everything delivered there with a receipt tucked neatly into an envelope labeled, "For Becca." Not out of kindness, but because I wanted her to know that nothing she left behind was welcome anymore. And while it all moved out, I went room to room like an exorcist, clearing out remnants of their presence. I stripped the beds, vacuumed glitter out of the rugs, found candy wrappers under the couch cushions, and a juice box wedged behind the TV stand. It was like discovering how deep the infestation had gone. Months of passive invasion, of my home becoming less mine with each unspoken compromise. Every drawer I reclaimed, every shelf I wiped clean, felt like pulling breath back into lungs that had been constricted for far too long. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. No text, no announcement. That silence was the most deliberate part. Because for once, I wasn't asking for their permission, their understanding, or their approval. I wasn't trying to explain myself into worthiness. I wasn't playing the role of the reliable background sister who swallowed her pride for the sake of family peace. I was done playing a role in a script they never let me write. By the time the sun dipped low and the locks were new, and the hallway echoed again with the sound of just my footsteps, the air felt different, lighter, clearer, almost cold in its honesty. I poured myself another glass of wine, not to celebrate, but to mark the occasion like a quiet ceremony. The kind where no one claps, no one cheers, but you still know something sacred just happened. Their absence didn't echo like I expected it to. It didn't feel lonely, it felt right. Like my house had been holding its breath this whole time and could finally exhale. Even the walls seemed to settle. There were no more arguments muffled through doors, no more slamming cabinets or thudding upstairs feet. Just stillness, my stillness. I slept better that night than I had in months. No noise, no interruptions, no pretending to be okay with being walked over. And I knew, oh, I knew, that when they returned from their perfect little escape, sunburnt and self-satisfied, bags in hand, expecting everything to be just as they left it, they would be met not with a confrontation, but with a simple fact. They were no longer welcome here. I didn't want to fight. I didn't need one. I had already won. The thing about a house, especially when it's your own, is that it remembers who built it, who paid for it, who stayed up late to fix the leak in the basement, to shovel the driveway, to choose the paint color for the hallway, and hang the damn photos. A house, like a person, knows who belongs inside it and who doesn't. And when the time comes to draw that line, to say enough, to take back what's yours, the house doesn't argue. It just lets the door close. It was almost cinematic, the way the clouds rolled in that afternoon, casting long gray shadows across the driveway, as if the sky itself had caught wind of what was coming. I had known their return date for weeks. Becca mentioned it offhandedly during that smug little call when she dismissed me from the family vacation roster. Said they'd be back on Tuesday sometime in the afternoon, because of course, they never cared enough to be precise with me. But that worked just fine. I didn't need precision. I needed space, silence, and the full knowledge that when they walked up to what they still considered their safe haven, their backup plan, their convenient cushion, they would find themselves firmly on the outside, no longer welcome to all the things they never once thanked me for. I was sitting in the living room with my legs tucked under me on the couch, the house quiet save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the vintage wall clock I had bought before their invasion, before my home became some kind of halfway house for people who saw my kindness as an extension of their entitlement. The wine glass was empty this time, not because I needed calm, but because I wanted to remember every second of what was about to unfold. Crystal clear and etched into memory. There are moments in life you want to relive, and then there are moments you want to savor because you earned them. Not through cruelty, but through every swallowed insult, every fake smile, every moment you bit your tongue until it bled. I saw them through the front window before I heard them. Tom's massive SUV pulling up the drive, trunk crammed with luggage, kids bickering in the back seat, Becca in the passenger seat with that same tight-lipped smile she always wore when she wanted everyone to believe things were perfect. They hadn't even pulled into a hotel to shower off the lake water. They were coming straight here, straight to my front door, expecting clean sheets, working Wi-Fi, a stocked fridge, and their same old reality. Where Melissa, the dependable one, the negative one, the sister who never made a fuss, would have the place waiting like a good little housekeeper. But the key didn't work. I watched from the shadows of my living room as Becca slid her key into the lock, frowned, tried again, and then again, slower this time, as if maybe the door just needed her to be more polite. When that failed, she looked back at Tom, who shrugged and tried his own copy. Nothing. They exchanged glances, confusion first, then disbelief, then irritation. The kids were already out of the car, dragging bags, asking why the door wasn't opening, why the alarm beeped weird when they tried the garage code, why the house they had gotten used to wasn't welcoming them home. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't even blink. When Becca finally knocked, it wasn't gentle. It was the kind of knock that assumes something must be wrong because no one in her world could possibly defy her expectations, unless there had been a mistake. I let her knock 3 times, harder each time. Then she started ringing the doorbell. That's when I stood up, walked slowly to the door, and stopped just on the other side of it, close enough to hear her breathe, but not close enough to let her see me. I waited. I wanted her to feel the weight of that locked door, the physical barrier of consequence. "Melissa," she said, voice raised now, that brittle tone creeping in. "Are you home? What's going on? Why won't the door open?" She already knew the answer. She just didn't want to admit it. When the knocking turned into pounding and the kids started whining, I walked away from the door, picked up my phone from the counter, and watched as her name lit up the screen. I answered but didn't speak, just listened. "What the hell is going on?" she said, her voice shaky but sharp. "We can't get in. Did you change the locks? Is this some kind of joke?" I still said nothing. "You better open this damn door right now," she snapped, and I could hear her shifting, probably stepping back. Phone pressed harder to her ear. Still nothing from me. Just breath. Just silence. Just the sound of her finally hearing what it felt like to be dismissed without warning. Eventually, when I didn't give her what she wanted, the chance to scream at me properly, to demand answers or control the narrative, she hung up, and I watched as she paced the porch, flustered, frantic, flailing in the face of a reality she hadn't planned for. Tom tried calling next. I let it ring, then their son, then Mom. None of them got through. After nearly 20 minutes of confusion and escalating panic, they finally started putting it together. I saw the look on Becca's face change. Not rage, not confusion, but realization. A dawning, awful recognition that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the predictable pushover they had banked on. Maybe the sister they had labeled negative and moody and too sensitive wasn't interested in keeping up the role they had written for her anymore. Eventually, they left. Tom muttered something I couldn't hear, shoved the suitcases back into the car. The kids were crying, and Becca was trying to hide her own tears behind sunglasses. Even though the clouds still hadn't cleared, she didn't look up at the window. She didn't try again. She just got in the car, slammed the door, and drove off with the same false composure she always used to hide her messes. As the car disappeared down the street, I closed the blinds, exhaled deeply, and felt the most profound, unapologetic sense of peace I had known in years. Not because I had hurt them, not because I had won, but because I had finally chosen myself. And for once, I hadn't asked anyone's permission to do it. Let them scream, let them gossip, let them twist the story into whatever makes them feel better. Because this time, I wasn't going to open the door. Not then, not ever again. It didn't take long, just under 24 hours in fact, for the silence I had built with such intention to fracture under the weight of their collective discomfort. Like clockwork, as if they had rehearsed the choreography for years. The phone calls started rolling in again, this time not from Becca or Tom, but from the higher tier of the family hierarchy, our parents. And isn't it funny how people who once barely remembered your birthday can suddenly remember your phone number with perfect clarity when someone else starts crying on their porch with nowhere to go? The first call came from Dad, and if his tone had been even a little less hollow with obligation, I might have answered. But I knew that voice. It was the same one he used when reminding me to send a holiday card to Aunt Marilyn, or asking if I could just drop off a casserole at someone's house because Becca was too busy, and well, I was always available. The second call from Mom came with a voicemail that tried to mask guilt with concern. "Sweetheart," she began, the word already sticky with performance. "We heard there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Becca's very upset. I don't know what's going on, but this isn't like you." That's the line that got me, not the concern, not the clumsy attempt at diffusing the situation without acknowledging it, but the absolute confidence that I must have been the one out of character, that the problem couldn't possibly have been the years of passive disregard and emotional freeloading. It had to be something new, something uncharacteristic, because the version of me they recognized would never draw a line in the sand. That version would bend, swallow, smile, accommodate, forgive. They were right about one thing: it wasn't like me. Or rather, it wasn't like the version of me they had built and benefited from. But that woman was gone, stripped away by the accumulation of small, thoughtless decisions made by people who assumed I'd never react, never retaliate, never dare to inconvenience their comfort with the weight of my own boundaries. By noon, the calls had doubled. Dad texted twice, then tried calling again. Mom left another voicemail, this one edged with more desperation, like she'd been briefed on what to say and how to say it. "It's just Family doesn't do this to each other, honey, she said, her voice wavering slightly toward the end. You can't just lock your sister out of your house like this. And that's when I laughed, genuinely laughed, because of the absurdity in that sentence, in its unspoken premise that I was the one who had drawn first blood. They had forgotten the months I cooked meals for 5 people while working remote full-time. They had conveniently erased the nights I drove their kids to soccer practice, or the time I paid the plumber $300 to fix a clog their son caused because he flushed an entire bar of soap for fun. No one remembered how many times I said yes when I wanted to scream no, but now that I had stopped saying anything at all, now that I had simply removed the welcome they assumed was permanent, I was the villain. I didn't respond. I let the silence stand for itself, let it stretch into the spaces they had taken for granted. I went about my day, washed my sheets, cleaned out the fridge, folded laundry, ordinary tasks that felt extraordinary now. Not because they were special, but because they were finally mine again. Every action, every quiet moment was a declaration. This is my space, and I no longer owe you access to it. Later that afternoon, the real kicker came, not through a call or a text, but in the form of a carefully worded group message that popped up in the family chat thread. The same one that had been mostly dead for months except when Becca posted filtered vacation photos or our parents sent overly dramatic memes. Suddenly, the group was alive again. Can we all just be adults about this? Becca wrote, clearly the author, even though the message was technically from both her and Tom. We understand there's been tension, but locking us out was extreme. We didn't want to involve Mom and Dad, but now they're worried. Can we please talk? No apology, no acknowledgement. Just a veiled demand for civility from people who had casually discarded mine. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. They were already unraveling without my participation, struggling to patch a narrative that didn't include my silence as compliance. For once, I wasn't on the outside begging for attention. I was the one who had removed the piece they all took for granted. And now they were discovering how shaky the whole structure had been without it. As the evening rolled in, I stood on my back porch, sipping tea, watching the wind comb through the trees. My phone sat inside on the counter, face down, still lighting up every few minutes with some new attempt at resolution. But none of it moved me, because suddenly I mattered. Not in the shallow, transactional way they were used to, not as a convenience or a fallback plan, but as someone who had finally forced them to look at the cracks they had ignored for years. They didn't like this version of me, but I did, and I was just getting started. It was 2 days later, just as the heat broke and the sky let loose one of those lazy summer rains that seemed to drape everything in a soft, silvery curtain, when Becca showed up again, this time without Tom, without the kids, without her usual armor of excuses and half smiles and practiced explanations that never quite acknowledged the damage they caused. I heard her car before I saw her, the gravel crunching under the tires in that slow, hesitant way people move when they aren't sure if they're welcome, and for a moment, I considered not getting up at all, just letting her sit in her parked car while the rain tapped gently on the windshield. Maybe long enough for her to think about everything she had done and everything she hadn't. But curiosity won, not because I expected an apology. God knows those were as rare in our family as quiet dinners. But because I wanted to see her face. I wanted to look into the eyes of the person who had dismissed me as too negative for a vacation while living rent-free in my house, who had watched my generosity stretch thinner and thinner without once wondering when it might snap. And when I opened the door, she was already halfway up the walk, soaked to the knees, mascara barely hanging on, her hands clenched into fists like she'd been practicing whatever speech she thought might win her some form of redemption. She didn't wait to be invited in, of course not, just stopped a few feet from the doorway, looked up at me through the drizzle, and said in a voice so fragile it almost didn't sound like her, "Can we talk, please?" I said nothing, just stepped aside, letting her walk past me into a house that no longer belonged to her in any way. Not in the drawer she used to leave her vitamins. Not in the shelf she took over in the bathroom, not in the air. which no longer smelled like the stress and clutter she dragged around like an overstuffed purse. She stood awkwardly in the living room, eyes flicking around at how much emptier, how much cleaner it looked. And maybe she realized for the first time that the absence of her family wasn't just physical, it was a kind of peace that had settled into the walls. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she began, but I raised a hand, not to silence her, but to redirect her, because the last thing I wanted was another vague, half-hearted non-apology wrapped in justifications. "Don't start with that," I said quietly, but firmly. "Start with the truth. Say what you're really here to say." She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. The words weren't coming easily, which surprised me because Becca had always been good at talking her way around things, good at spinning herself into the center of any situation, turning herself into the misunderstood hero in a family drama no one else had agreed to audition for. But here, now, with rainwater dripping from her hair onto the hardwood floor and no one left to back her up, her usual script had clearly unraveled. "I messed up," she finally whispered. And though it wasn't quite enough, it was something, an admission that cost her more than she probably realized. I didn't reply immediately. I just sat down, motioned for her to do the same, and we stared at each other for what felt like forever, the silence between us far more honest than any of the words she had yet spoken. "You know what really got me?" I said finally, leaning back, arms folded loosely over my chest. "It wasn't even the vacation. It wasn't that you went without me, or even that you said I was too negative. It was that you made that decision about me so easily, like I was disposable, like it was just obvious to you that I wasn't worth including." She swallowed hard, eyes glassy now. "It wasn't about you being disposable," she said softly. "We just thought, you've been quiet lately and kind of distant, and we didn't want to make it worse." "No," I said, voice sharper than I intended. "You didn't want to make yourselves uncomfortable. You didn't want to deal with me not pretending everything was okay, because pretending made things easier for you." She looked down, nodded once, and for the first time in years, I saw something genuine cross her face. Regret, maybe, or shame. It didn't fix anything, but it made the moment real. "I need a place to go," she said after another long silence, barely audible, the words laced with something raw and desperate. "You had one," I replied, without anger, just finality. She looked up, eyes wide, as if she hadn't expected me to say it so plainly. But there was nothing left to say, really. The damage had been done long before the locks were changed or the suitcases were packed. It had been done over years of casual dismissal, of never taking me seriously, until my silence turned into an answer she couldn't ignore. "I miss my sister," she said quietly, and for a moment I almost faltered, because I missed her too. Not the version that used me, but the one who laughed with me under blankets as kids, the one who braided my hair before school dances, the one I had believed still existed beneath all that selfishness. But then I remembered how easy it was for her to erase me, how casually she explained it away, how confidently she chose everyone else over me. And I realized that I didn't miss her. I missed the idea of her, the sister I thought I had. "You want forgiveness?" I asked, standing slowly. "Start by asking yourself if you ever actually liked me, or if I was just useful." She blinked, stunned, like the idea had never even occurred to her. And with that she stood, walked to the door without being asked, paused once at the threshold, as if waiting for a different ending. I said nothing. I owed her nothing more. She left, rain still falling, the world outside unchanged, but something in me finally quieted. I went back to my chair, picked up the blanket she used to borrow without asking, and wrapped it around myself like armor. Later, my phone buzzed, a new message in the family chat, something about how we should all move forward. I didn't even open it. I deleted the thread entirely. They always said I was the dramatic one. They always said I made mountains out of molehills, saw a fence where none was meant, took things too seriously. But maybe it wasn't drama they were afraid of. Maybe it was just the idea of someone finally holding up a mirror and refusing to be their scapegoat any longer. Funny how when I finally stopped talking, they all started listening. And maybe they'll never understand what that silence cost me. Or maybe that's the point.